Okay, so we're gonna move on from that. Speaking of injuries, Cavs have a lot of them. They have two more on the docket right now. Evan Mobley and Darius Garland didn't stop them from winning against Atlanta this past Sunday night, or was it Saturday night? Saturday night doesn't matter.
Saturday.
To be fair, Atlanta was on the back end of a 2-2. What do you call those things? Home and home, back to back. Sure. And then you play the Rockets tonight, which they're terrible away from their arena, so you'll probably win that one. With that, I mean, I think we saw it last year. Was Garland injured for a good portion of the start of last season? I believe he was.
Yeah, I believe last year was the
So
opening night where he got poked in the
yes,
eye.
so that was the part of the stretch where the Cavs got off to a really good start when Donovan Mitchell was taking most of the positions at point guard. I wonder if we're going to get the same stretch here now because I think Cleveland's out of the funk for the most part. They're probably going to pick it up here a little bit, maybe go on a bit of a stretch. Not saying they're going to go guns blazing, but they're going to be better than I think the slow start they had this year. I wonder if it's going to be Donovan Mitchell starting to make that run a bit again to make you wonder, like, hey, dude, the Cavs need to make a decision on who should be the main guard. And number two, how do you work around these injuries? Because yeah, you still got Jared Allen as a big man, but Mobley is still he's a guy that is a playmaker for you as a big man. He's gone. And then Garland had been seemingly getting better on the assist front, and now he's not going to be available for some time.
Yeah, to start with Garland, yes, he's had injuries, but this isn't a guy that's having these little nicks and
No.
bumps and bruises that linger. He fractured his jaw. I don't know if in my life I've seen an NBA player have a fractured jaw from a game to miss time. Okay, so I'm not going to dub him as injury prone. They have four very winnable games in their next four, and they're all three of the next three are at home. They play the Rockets, they play the Jazz, they play the Pelicans, and then they go to Chicago. They have to go 3-1 because after that is where the stretch kind of starts to get tough because then they go to Dallas, then they're home against Milwaukee, then they're in Toronto, a team that we just seemingly cannot get their number down. The Wizards come here in January for two. Spurs, I'm not going to just say it's an easy win just because when you had those two bigs, I would have said it, but with just
Right.
Jared Allen now
Right.
guarding Wembanyama, I don't know. But then in January, you have the Bucks again in Atlanta, in Orlando, which right now is apparently the second hardest place to play in the NBA. Third, excuse me, behind Boston and Houston. The Bucks again, the Bucks again, the Clippers, and then the Pistons. Which at that point, I don't even know if they're going to have three wins. So who knows?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a bit.
What's interesting though is what happens if this team doesn't get these wins over bad teams. Brian Windhurst, in my opinion, is one of the most reputable NBA reporters there is. And he had said when the Cavs were struggling recently, January 15th is the date. That if things don't get figured out, the Cavs are probably going to make a change, whether that is a head coach firing, a trade of getting rid of somebody on this team. If this team tanks, what happens to Donovan Mitchell is what I want to know. Because if this team tanks and they're flirting with that 7, 8, 9, 10 seed in the East, do they keep Mitchell? I'm not saying this that I want to get rid of him. I don't
No,
want to get
I
rid of him.
know,
I
I
think
know.
Donovan Mitchell's tremendous,
Yeah.
but you have to almost wonder: are you doing anything to warrant him signing an extension? And if not, do you go get what you can get for him? Because
Right.
somebody out there will trade for him. I would have to venture to say 24 of the other 29 teams with the Cavs excluded would trade for Donovan Mitchell. Obviously, I hope we don't get to that point. Obviously, I hope that he goes in that tear he was on last year to a point where you're almost wondering, oh, shoot, could he be an MVP candidate? I just don't know. I don't know what this team looks like. I mean, Jared Allen having 25 and 14 against Atlanta with no Evan Mobley is like, oh,
It's good.
could he step up now with no
I hope
Mobley?
so.
Garland and Mobley are out for at least a month. It's possible they're out for two. You're going to have to tread water. When I say tread water, you're going to have to beat all these bad teams
Yeah.
and beat them, and maybe hopefully spring a win or two here, catching a team like Milwaukee on a back to back or somebody like that. But I don't know what happens, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you. Last episode or last week, I was telling you no, it's not fire JB Bickerstaff because I don't think it is. And you're not. I can't warrant firing a coach who just lost two of his starting five in the NBA after he just had us at 51 wins last year. It all started back with New York, though. After we got bounced in the playoffs, they changed the offense in the offseason,
Yeah.
and you heard
Yeah.
about it. And this offense hasn't looked good. And the defense certainly is not where it was last year, the number one defense in the NBA.
No.
I don't know. I don't know. It's we aren't paying as much attention to them, and we're not talking about them as much because our football team is very, very good. And outside of 2020 and 07, we only ever talked about the Cavs because the Browns were a factory of sadness. Now they're kind of distracting us
Yeah,
now.
yeah. But I've tried to keep pace with both teams. It's been a
Right.
little harder for Cavs though.
At this point last year, though, I feel like we were definitely talking Cavs a little bit more.
Maybe
And that's probably
because they were
because
so
Donovan
good.
Mitchell was here. Yeah, they were so good. Donovan Mitchell was here. It was the first year with him, but I I don't know what happens if this team can't tread water. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not saying trade Donovan Mitchell, but I think it's a very real possibility that if this team falls under and goes under here and they're stuck between 7 and 10 in the Eastern Conference, that they trade Donovan Mitchell potentially.
That's the thing right now, though. You're eighth in the standings right now in the East. You're in the play-in tournament, just behind Indiana and considerably behind Milwaukee. Just stay at 500 until mid-January. Just stay at 500 until late January. If you're at that point right then when you get to the All-Star break, you're like, okay, let's wait for Darius. Let's wait for Evan. Try to make a run there at the end. If you're bottoming out by that point, then it's like, yeah, we got to do something about it at this point, because then you're falling back with the Chicagos, the Atlantas. I'm not going to say the Charlottes, Washingtons, and Detroits because that's a whole other level.
No.
Of, holy cow! But yeah, that's when you're kind of like, wow, the 70-point game might have been the peak of this core of Cavs players, and then you're probably gonna have to get rid of Mitchell because if you're going to choose between two point guards, you're going to choose the younger, less experienced, more to grow Darius than
And
Donovan, who's
cheaper.
go ahead. Yeah, cheaper too.
Cheaper.
Even though Donovan is one of my top two favorite Cavs post LeBron, and he's not number two. So yeah, I'm at that point. Yeah, if you're losing at much at that point, yeah, it might be time to be a realist and say this is not it. But keep pace, win a playing game or two. I mean, look at last year. 2 playing teams got all the way to the conference finals. One was 2 wins away from the finals. So anything can happen. Anything can happen is what I'm going to say.